So welcome to another video from theplayersaid.com. My name's Alexander, and today we are learning and doing something of a after-action report of Pursuit of Glory from GMT Games. Subtitle of this game is The Great War in the Near East. And of course, I don't have it handy, but front cover has Lawrence of Arabia on it, but this game covers much more than that. This game covers kind of, well, World War I in the Near East. So I have never played this before, and I'm doing a couple different things here with this. I've wanted to play this for a long time, I've wanted to learn this for a long time, but it's just one of those games that like keeps getting pushed off. But I have a little bit of time where I'm going to play around with this for a few days and kind of figure out what that looks like. But with this game, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play through the sample game, which my understanding of the sample game is that it has a couple turns in it, and it goes through, I think, the winter of 1915. So you got a couple turns, and it will kind of land you up in limited war, and from there we'll kind of have figured out a bit more maybe what we're looking to do historically wise with action, but also like a bit more familiar with the mechanics. We have played Paths of Glory, the little intro scenario once, so I know some of the rules of this, but want to kind of get into this one because I think I like the theme of this one, and it's something a little bit different, and I think people might be excited to see this. As you can see though, I also have the CDG solo system which GMT put out. They just released, I don't know, who knows when this is posting, but I am recording this when they just charged for the CDG Solo System number 2, which includes the Pursuit of Glory. And I have, what do I do with it? So, the nice thing is, and I really appreciate GMT for doing this, they have a print and play of that pack. So you can buy it, and it's got like the special fake die in it, and it's got the cool play cards and stuff. But you can also just like print this out. So this is the specific CDG solo system rules that were made for Pursuit of Glory. And basically ever since they announced it, I was like, oh, amazing. I'm going to hold off till I've got this so that I can kind of squeeze this in and kind of have a bit more, I don't know, I have something a bit more robust to solo this with that's tailored for this game. So, just to recap, I'm going to do the first 2 turns out of the sample game, and then I'm going to set the CDG solo system up and play the rest of the game against that. It is the goal. We will see how far I get. Time constraints are something, so I don't know how many turns we're going to get through, but you know, if you've never seen this system or played it or seen this particular game, hopefully you can walk through a few different things. But some things to note with setup is this is 1914, and it is things are very weak. This is I presume that the Ottomans over the course of the game will start to crumble and get a bit weaker and collapse as the Ottoman Empire collapses and then goes into becomes Turkey. But they have a lot of stronger units kicking around up here and a few up here as well. And they got some bits and pieces and elite units dotted around. But this is kind of the height of that Ottoman Empire. It covers a very large geographic area. But they're fighting on a lot of different fronts. So we got a good number of Russian troops up here. The Russians have some in reserve. There's a few Greek units, and then a lot of these other Balkan countries like Romania, Bulgaria, Serbia. Those have like entry rules that can come in during the game. There is this little inset map for Gallipoli, which I think is going to be very interesting. I'm very interested to see what that looks like. And this inset is this tiny little box right here. So, you know, obviously we know the Gallipoli campaign was something that was very important, at least from a strategic resource standpoint, if nothing else. And so there we do have a nice good focus on that. We also have, for the CP side, it's kind of difficult to see because I got them the other way around. We have all of this is the tribal warfare key, where, you know, in theory, Lawrence of Arabia is trying to unite the Arab tribes to become independent and revolt against the Ottomans. I presume this is trying to get unity between those tribes. All the different tribes have their own little individual counters, and I presume the CP player is trying to break those apart as well and kind of snuff those out so the Arab revolt never materializes in any significant way. We do have a track also for the Russian Revolution. It's World War I. We know it's going to happen at some point. So Russia has all this stuff up here, but it's how much can they do before the revolution comes and things kind of collapse. What does the Ottoman influence look like at that point? Have they lost a bunch of stuff? Who knows? And then to start with, we have Indian Commonwealth troops are set up with a beachhead, and you can choose into which of these 3 beachhead spots. I know that there's some glare here, and it's kind of hard to see. I really tried to but these units, I set them up on a beachhead going into Kuwait. So I have to fight into Kuwait and Shaiba, and then into Basra or into Syria. But this was like, I don't know. I just kind of like picked one, and I figured, I don't know why I did that, but who knows what that looks like. But there's this whole kind of beachhead and naval landing that's already in progress as this game starts. Couple really unique units on the board. We have these Turkish Arab units that's like a camel corps. Indians have a camel corps as well. There is an Anzac one that's not on the board yet. We have a Royal Navy Armored Car Division, which is pretty cool. You just don't see counters like that very often in games. But other than that, you know, it's a lot of the Paths of Glory style mechanics with a lot of extra bits and pieces, bells and whistles, and exceptions. And that's one of the things that I'd heard about this game is, like, it's cool, but, like, it's maybe a bit more clunky because there's just a lot more stuff and chrome to put into something like this. But I'm interested in the theme, and I don't know if I necessarily care about that, but you have your little action round chart with your actions that you can spend, and those are kind of fixed, or there's constraints on what you can do with those for both players. We're starting with our mobilization cards. There's limited war and total war cards, which are off map because this is a seeded deck. And in the sample game, you start with a hand of 7 cards, and I think the Russo-British assault is the kind of one that they're like, hey, you start with that one, and the other ones are like chosen randomly. And I think it was, I forget, it was a 4-1, isn't it? Maybe Indian Mutiny, one of these that was like, you couldn't optionally start with any 4 card, and so those are some of the ones that they started with. So we're immediately going to start doing some kind of significant events and bits and pieces. So, but again, I'm going to play through the playbook through that sample game, so I will not be making a whole bunch of choices in the first 2 rounds. So if you have this game and you have the playbook, you can kind of follow that along. But I will just show you at the end of each round kind of where things are at, because you don't want to see me learn a game that's complicated. I mean, you might do, but it's not going to happen on camera because I'm going to sit here for the next few hours just humming and hawing. But I appreciate you kind of sticking with me through this kind of learning experience as we figure this out, but I will see you at the end of round 1. So welcome to the end of turn 1. Of a potential 17 turns. Again, we're not going to get that far. If I get through kind of the whole of 1915 by the end of this week, I'll be pretty happy with myself of kind of getting to grips with this game. But again, this is the end of turn 1, so that is 6 actions for each side, and there's these little displays here. You can see I've got like a bunch of the markers are upside down, but that's because I'm playing solo, so I just want to be able to read everything. There was a good chunk of action here against the Russians, and the playbook says that this is basically just a resource sink for the Ottomans, because it's extremely likely that at some point the revolution will occur, just within the bounds of the game, but it's how much... can they do anything? Can they take some of these away? How much does it draw the Ottoman resources in, or the Turkish resources in? And that's the major function of this Russian front. And it's already seeming to be that. They had to commit a lot of basically all of their RPs went into these large cores here, and the Russians, it was attacking here and kind of really supporting, bringing reinforcements. Lots of kind of swirling mess here, but not a ton. We had an exchange of victory points. I believe we picked up, the Russians picked up something somewhere. I don't remember where. Now I've said that. Oh, no, it was the Ottomans lost Basra, so they lost a VP from that. They also lost a VP because we destroyed all of these forts in the Gallipoli inset. But the Ottomans gained one back, so this was started at 10, it went down to 8, went back up to 9, because they took Urmia, which is, this red border is a victory point. And there, we're not threatening these quite yet, but there's a lot of Turkish forces here ready to kind of try to make these push, but these are forts, so that's going to be very expensive. And here we're quite weak to try and do anything against this stack here at the moment. So that's kind of where that stands. Built a little bit of trenches here as a defensive measure. Nothing happening over here, basically. Just cleared out units to bring them over to this edge. But we did have we had the naval shore bombardments of all of these forts. It destroyed all of these, which I think is also going to happen every game. It was very easy to do that with the die rolls. We did shell Constantinople, which annoyed the locals and moved the jihad marker up 1 and caused them to hate us because of what we were doing. We did not destroy the Bosphorus fort, unfortunately. That would have been great. That was all kind of part of the same action. And then because we had done this and this was successful, it puts a couple guys ready to do the Gallipoli landings here in Lemnos. So we're going to, at some point in 1915, we're going to launch these guys in here and get that going. So they're gonna launch. They can go to any of these places, but we're probably gonna do Gallipoli, and then they're gonna dump onto here, and then we're gonna fight on this little inset map as well. Down here in the Middle East and Egypt, it was much a case of positioning. So put out a few guys, and the Ottomans put out a couple guys, and it was just moving everyone to the Suez. So some things never change, historically speaking, but no action, so to speak, there. Yeah, a couple guys down here. We landed, so I ended up changing. I said I was going to invade Kuwait, but I landed in Fao, took Basra, so we're ready. We put reinforcements in here. We're ready to kind of make a push through this and see what we can get done as well. If we can draw resources away from the Russians, potentially. Curious to see what that looks like. But that's the end of turn 1. We got hands of cards for turn 2. We're going to, once again, we're going to walk through the playbook. We're going to do turn 2, winter 1915. We're going to go through all of that before we start setting up and using the solo system to do a bit more of our own volition after that. So that's where it sets us up. That's kind of everything that we've walked through, but see you at the end of the next round. So here's a look at the map at the end of turn 2. So this just moved into, we'll start turn 3 in a second. So it was winter of 1915, and what that meant is that when you're attacking in mountains, you have to roll for like severe weather, and the British opened with like a forced CP assault, basically. So up here, it was like you can choose a couple of spaces and you can force them to activate and make frankly disadvantageous attacks, which is what happened. And basically, like, you roll severe weather, you get absolutely, like, everyone flips, and then you do combat into mountains against defend. Like, it's awful. And so that was the first card that the Allied powers played, and basically it just like flipped all of these guys and nothing happened, and a bunch of guys died. But basically, that fulfilled a CP mandated offensive against the Russians, but it really like didn't actually do anything strategically. So that was a very interesting concept of like the Allied player forcing the Central Powers player into doing something that was kind of ugly and really gross. So that was kind of a big thing that happened. Some other things to note is that the Allied players played Secret Treaty, which basically like violates Persia's neutrality. They start as neutral, and it flips over, and it basically just like opens all of this up, this whole Persian front. And what happened was, when we did that, we placed a couple units in there, specifically this Persian cordon unit here. But the Arab tribes not very happy about that, and so they put out a couple guys in response. So there's more tribes out here. The jihad marker went all the way up to a 5 because of some other things that happened. And then the Russians swung a bunch of units down in here to kind of help to alleviate this, and also just to like put a lot of pressure to protect things like Kut, Baghdad, Shusta down here, in oil fields in Arabistan. So this is really horrible looking. But the Central Powers player, because the jihad marker went up, was able to put out a bunch of tribes, and they're kind of like holding a line. They're pretty weak, so this is a real quagmire for the Turkish player, for the Ottoman player, because they have to swing a bunch of guys down here and fight all of this, hopefully with help from these Arab tribes, but they're quite fickle at times. So we took Qam as the Russians, which has this little sword symbol. That's a jihad city. And basically we went there and we like quelled it, and so it reduced the jihad level, and we took a guy off the board. So if we can get to Baghdad, we can do that again. There's a couple other places on the board that kind of just help alleviate some of that if we can get to Jerusalem or Medina, but that's much less. We're a long way away from that, that's for sure. But that was a very interesting thing that happened. Russians picked up a couple victory points, which helps to stave off the revolution, is my understanding as well. No movement down here at all. It was a lot of fighting up here and rearranging and making sure that we're like in decent shape. Nothing here with invasions. We didn't have any good cards to do that with, and also it's winter, so we want to hold off on that. So yeah, it being winter, there's not a ton of stuff that happened outside of some gross offensives, opening up Persia. There's a few more trenches on the board that the CP player put out for themselves, and it was just kind of like moving some guys down and reinforcing areas is really most of what happened. It wasn't a whole ton of like exciting stuff that went on. But as you can see, I've got the CDG solo for the Central Powers setup, and I know you're supposed to do both and just like play both, but I'm going to play one of them fully open-handed, just so that I can like really get to grips and figure that out, and play against, not against, but like play with one side as the CDG, so that I can both learn this as well, and we get a little bit less predictability going on, is mostly what I'm going up against. I know you're not really supposed to do that, but that's what we're doing anyway. You're supposed to do both sides with these limitations, but I want to be able to learn how to figure a hand out, and I'm still not quite there with that. But that's where we're at the end of turn 2. Oh, that's right. We set up a naval blockade as the allies, which flipped the VP marker over. And every winter phase, if the blockade is still in effect, the Central Powers loses a victory point. So currently there are 8 victory points. And it started as 10. So they're down a bit. If we can get it to 0, Allied powers win. If it gets up to 20, Central Powers win. So, you know, there's stuff to be had. Everything's close by, but it can be quite a fickle game, I think. Because I think if you start to like make a bunch of progress here, there's a lot of victory points right here, and if you can take all of these, there's very hard to get back for the ally player, at which point you now can like send all these guys elsewhere. I don't know. There's a lot of very interesting stuff to be done and to be had and to be won in this game. But that's where we're at the end of turn 2. I will see you at the end of turn 3. So welcome to the end of turn 3. I just moved this into turn 4, so we just finished spring of 1915. And this was the first turn where I wasn't just following the kind of the example game in the playbook, and I was using the CDG solo system. And I think this is also the first time I've actually ever used this. I think I had printed it out back in like years and years ago when it was a print and play on BGG, specifically for Paths of Glory, and just never got round to it. And I was waiting for a while, because they had announced this for Pursuit of Glory, so I was like, okay, well, I'll wait and do this, because I can do this in my own time. So just know that from now on, the tactical decisions are going to be deeply unsound, and I'm sure strategically all over the place. But that's what you get with wargaming, especially this is my first time through this. So as I go, I'm trying to assess, what I can do, because there's lots of limitations in these kinds of games, but also what I should do. Really trying to win. So, just as like a primer, this was very easy to use. And I know, literally, the game says you can't play against this. You're supposed to do this for both sides. I want to be able to have the experience of nosing through a hand, but then also, a little bit of uncertainty with what the opponent's going to do. So that might be a handicap for the CP, although you might not be able to tell from the way that they're conducting themselves. But I'm not trying to be competitive. I'm just trying to learn this game. So that's kind of how I'm going about things. In this particular instance, we had an allied player mandated offensive in Persia or Mesopotamia, and the Central Powers player rolled TU for Turkish, so one Turkish unit had to do an offensive, and I felt like maybe more than in some of the other turns, not many good events had come up. So I felt like there was a lot of ops spent in this one. So the Allied player kicked it off, trying to do some combats in this area over here. I think we would try, because I think we did this attack into here to satisfy our mandated offensive. So we had some units doing some attacks here, a little bit of damage, but no real movement, which was a shame. And then, not really sure what else. I can't remember. Oh, I think they did some attacks up here, but none of the Allied players' offensives really did anything this turn. Nothing that meaningful, anyway. We were trying to do some attacks, poking around and probing down here, but nothing meaningful. But then the Central Powers responded with some ops. So they made a little mini breakthrough here, and for a while this was maybe not tenuous, but there's a few factors here that could have gone this way, although one of those has subsequently moved down, so there was really only... This was a reduced strength large combat unit, and even if they had gone here, we could still just trace supply this way, and this would have been counterattacked. So yeah, overstretching yourself in this game is not good. A bit of a gamble. We did an attack here, killed some guys, moved up, left a guy behind, and this kind of line got a bit more kind of stretched as things went on. But they, killed some Russian units, made some headway there. The Russian eliminated units is getting a bit larger than you'd like. They also had... they'd had an offensive where you had to spend some of the ops to try to liberate the Suez, which went horrendously. Just like, because when you attack over a waterway, the defender fires first. So we took a couple losses. They also took a loss in this stack, and then we're attacking at like 2s at -1. So down to the 1 table. So this was basically nothing but just to satisfy the requirements of a card. And spent the other ops elsewhere. And we'd sent units down to build up to maybe try, but seeing how ineffective that was, we're a ways away from doing anything meaningful here. But conversely, we also know that, even with 3 combat factors trying to cross a waterway, there's not a ton of threat of them breaking back this way. Although, only 1-2 steps here, 2 loss factors, it could happen, but there's enough emergency forces to swing down if we need it. At least as things stand. Maybe if reinforcements come in, different story. The jihad level went up, I think, 2 points this turn. which brought out a couple extra guys. I think we did this one here, and then I think we also put out one. Where'd the other one? Oh, I think we put out maybe this one. I don't really remember. I've had lunch and I've forgotten. Is basically what's happened there. But again, this is fairly tenuous, so to speak. It's really easy for the Russians to take this guy, but again, that's almost going backwards territory-wise for them. And but then the Turks also can't go too far because they'll get cut off. So this is very fragile, and it could go one way or the other depending on how things roll dice-wise. The Allied player played the Gallipoli invasion card, which put out a bunch of units out here into Lemnos, so that they can, in turn 4, land in the Gallipoli inset map where they're going to put out their beachhead markers and then start going on to here, because there is a lot of victory points available. So we'll see, but that terrain is very tough going, and some of these fortresses are pretty gnarly. So we'll see how that goes. I'm very curious to see how that goes, if that's like feasible or if it's like scripted and like really difficult, or how much the Ottomans are going to have to commit troops from Constantinople and beyond to like swing down in here and take this, kind of fight them off, because there's a lot of strong units here. And this, you know, we bumped up the units with our replacement points at the end of the turn, so we also have strong units, but I just have no idea how that's going to look, honestly. So that's something I'm curious to explore next turn, but we staged everything there. Other than that, this was tactically kind of interesting. I don't know if you can see this because of the glare, but we have we got these Commonwealth forces. There's an Indian Cav and an Indian Infantry Division, and then some Anzacs as well. Oh, yes. And they're sat in Basra, and we had one Indian unit sat in Fao, which was kind of the connecting port for supply back to Bahrain. And we were doing a little bits of combat and plinking guys, not really doing anything, but then the Turkish player swung this unit down around here to threaten and cut off supply here, and that kind of forced the Allied player to play their Indian reinforcements, I believe, to kind of put a bunch of guys on and then subsequently move them on here just to protect this a bit more. But, you know, we also have a very strong contingent of units now. So now we have a holding force in Basra, and we can have this big stack go and try and clean up all this stuff. The problem is now is that it's summer, so it's super mega hot, and the swamp and the desert, so all these yellow and all these kind of swampy ones, which is basically everything down here, those are going to be considered severe weather terrains for the next turn, for turn 4. And so you have to roll. You pay to do an attack, then you have to roll, and if you mess up the roll, you take a bunch of damage, and then I think then resolve the attack, or the attack doesn't happen. It's not good. It's because it's too hot. So this might even just be a stalemate until the fall, when we can really do some combats and make some difference. Maybe we'll move some guys down. I'm not really sure. It could be very risky and very dangerous to do a lot in the summer in this horrible, horrible terrain. But I think that's generally it. You know, it's a case of, got some guys here, but like a lot of these are control markers, right? So it's little piddly units that can't really get any strength together to do any meaningful attacks that wouldn't be probably close to an exchange. So at some point we're going to try to build some of those up. And the Turks did some successful attacks up here. The Russians really didn't do a lot counterattacking, but were able to build some replacements and are going to start swinging those guys down here to hopefully maybe put some heat back on the Ottomans. But tough ask for the Russians. They're just not necessarily as strong as they might be. They've lost a lot of units already, which isn't great. But hopefully we got good hand of cards looking forward. But generally speaking, using this was pretty painless. The little kind of summary, you roll the die and kind of do what it says. Really not that bad. And, you know, just doing the most sensible thing with the card is basically what it comes down to. This is more a mode of selecting which card and randomizing it so you not necessarily know which one they're going to use. But that's kind of how things stand at the moment. Something that just to mention is this max TU replacement point. So the Turks, based on a card that was played in turn 2, they have this marker on the board. So they have 25 replacement points for the rest of the game, excluding any like bonus ones where it says gain a bonus one. So every time they spend an RP, this permanently goes down one, as well as using the little RP marker for that turn. So this is an aggregate of all the rest of the turns for the whole rest of the game, because they just have a limited number of guys they can call on, and war weariness and attrition is going to have an effect on the scale of this game based on historiosity. So this is going to be an interesting marker as it goes on. Like I used 2 this turn, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 max. So if we use 2 every turn and the game went the whole length, that's 26. Well, we don't even have that many, so there's going to be turns where we can't do anything. And so that might, that might not seem like a lot now, but I think as things wear on, this is going to be a real concern for the Turkish player, and using cards to get, if they have an event that has a bonus RP, you might be like desperate to use that for that instead of maybe for better ops or better replacement or better like strategic redeployment points on it that might be there. But anyway, that's kind of a look at the tactical situation and some of the new bits and pieces that we got going on in this playthrough, but what we'll do is see at the end of the next turn. So here's a look at the map ended turn 4. So this actually should just move this over here. It's going to be the beginning of turn 5 coming on soon. We had a lot of events, I feel, that were trying to get played or got played this game. Oh, I do need to adjust this real quick. Yeah, so we're going to move this here. That's what we're going to do. Okay. Basically, a lot of the allied player had a really good hand, like a very strong hand. Lots of very high op values, lots of high SR values, some really good events. They had at least 2 invasions, which are very powerful and can be used as reinforcements to bring a lot of units on. But it was really interesting the way that the bot worked. And it ended up throwing out the U-boats in the med event, which blocked like all of that stuff. Like you're not able to do kind of sea invasions, so all these guys were kind of stuck here, and you couldn't bring on reinforcements that drew supply through these, so I couldn't like load up more guys, which was very, very interesting that's what had happened. The Russians conducted their mandatory offensive and took this space, kind of pushing. Well, the Ottomans did pushing the Russians back. Tried to do a little bit of counter-attacking here and there. Wasn't really meaningful. I think we removed 1 Arab tribe unit, so I probably need to adjust the track here. So all things considered, I had a lot of events to play, played a lot of events. You can kind of see we ended up with a big stack of them here for the allied player, because the first 2 cards that they played Lawrence, which reduced the jihad level 1, and then did some ops. And we did that because we were also holding the Arab Revolt, which put out all these guys here. They then did an attack on Mecca, but were only able to enforce 1 reduction. And kind of after that, we didn't have enough points going on to do what we wanted to do. But we initiated that part of it, so we're really getting into the Lawrence of Arabia stuff going on, which that's part of the joy of this game. The nice themes. We had a couple of those events went off, so okay, I should get rid of those now. Just kept those aside to show you that, again, the theme of the game comes out in the cards, which is nice, as well as the gameplay, but sometimes those things kind of aid each other. You know, the I was holding the Salonika invasion card so that I could put a bunch of guys on and land in Athens. And I was doing that because I also had a card. I was trying to prevent the CP player from. The CP player also had a card that would force everyone out of here and down this way if they were attacking. So there was a lot of ifs, ands, and buts, and it ended up just kind of being a bit of a stalemate. Nothing happened because of the U-boats. We put in a lot of allied RPs. The CP player ended up not using any CP or not gaining any CPs. They haven't taken a ton of losses or reduced guys in dangerous places anyway, because we were able to prevent this. So we didn't want to waste a card doing that. So they just did a lot more different ops and events. Also, we used a couple last time, so anytime we can feel safe and secure in having not used those, that buys us an extra turn of not being forced not to have those, which is nice. All of these Commonwealth troops, these Indian troops, they moved up here, did a little attack here, didn't really go anywhere. But what's very interesting is that I had wanted to do a bunch of stuff, but I forgot that it's summer. And in summer, desert and swamp are considered severe weather. So you have to roll a die, and if you roll the action round or above, every single one of your guys who's attacking gets reduced before you resolve the attack. So, like, don't do that. That's not good. And so I waited until, like, turn 5, action round 5, to attack with these guys, and I rolled it like a 3, so they didn't take any damage, but as such, I couldn't, like, hammer it with these guys, which was, that was an interesting little dilemma that was going on. We did activate Romania, which you can kind of see up here. Can we see it right here? Yeah. These green units popped on the board. We now have Germans and Austro-Hungarians on the edge. When you activate these guys, you put them all on the board, and they do a free attack into here, which they reduced the little Austro-Hungarian division. Little Russian half core right there as well, reduced core. Bulgaria and Serbia haven't activated quite yet. And no one's really done anything with Greece. Maybe I should be moving the Turks down there. But I wasn't really sure what that's going to end up looking like. There's not a lot of ops in the game, right? This is a big game with lots of cards, but it's tough to... You're still kind of beholden to the amount of ops that you have, and there's some nice bits and pieces over here, maybe, and maybe I should have run up. You can't enter those until the Bulgaria event's played, so I don't really think we can. I think we're kind of stuck with those. But I think the other thing that had happened was the Russians. We had a Russian reinforcement card. There was some event. Maybe it was when those guys came on. I don't really remember, but we landed some guys over here. And Baratov arrived. So we had some Cav with an HQ came on, and they've come up to the front line. When the Turks pushed up here, they eliminated from the game Yudnich, who is he was the Russian HQ up here. He's gone, so that was not great. And then the final thing that happened in the turn was the CP player played Pavus to Berlin, which is basically the trigger in this game to initiate the process to start the Russian Revolution. I know that's convoluted, but basically Pavus goes on the turn he was played, which is turn 4, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 turns later you put the revolution marker on. This is the build-up to the revolution. Then this is going to go out here, and then it's got to progress through these different stages, and at that point, it's going to knock Russia out of the war. So, it's in theory possible, I believe, that it can race through these stages if it's a catastrophe for the Russians, but if we get to 16, it's going to be at least into 17. Hopefully we can, not lose all of those before the Russians get knocked out reasonably historically. But there's also this Long Live the Tsar marker. This is 2 turns ahead of this one because we have 2 Russian VPs, which we picked up here in Persia, in Tehran and in Hamadan. And as such, basically, when this goes up here and meets this spot, if the Long Live the Tsar is above this, because you've gained so many Russian VPs because the Russians are doing well, well, they don't want to overthrow the Tsar at the moment. So it's not until this marker catches up to this one. If you can keep gaining VPs miraculously by doing really well and the Ottomans are absolutely hosed, you might never catch it, or never catch it in time where you see this before the end of the game. That it's in theory possible. I don't know how realistic that is, but it's possible according to the rules. So I've got to get more Russian VPs in here somehow to push back the revolution as long as I can. But this is a lot of Ottoman units. Like, this is really gross. And I don't have a lot of force to push them back, so there's a bit of a stalemate. If I could break through, we could be in business, but I don't know if that's going to happen anytime soon, honestly. But that's kind of where everything stands. We conducted our mandated offensive, which was, I think it was Russians in this one, and over here it was TU. We had to have Turkish units conduct some kind of offensive. Those are really easy to make. I felt like in the Western Front one, it's a bit more challenging, or like some of them are a bit more of a gut punch where you're like, ugh, I have to make a bad attack. Here so far, at least in the early part of the war, I felt like these have all been decent enough, where I've been able to kind of take care of them in the natural course of the game. I haven't been going out of my way to do these. But they like would happen in the turn anyway. But that's where we are at the end of turn 5, end of turn 4, beginning of turn 5. Now we'll see you at the end of next turn. So welcome to the end of turn 5. Yes, end of turn 5. That's what we're doing. Okay, a very eventful turn. Even if there wasn't a ton of action on the board, I mean, there was, but a lot of the stuff might look a little bit similar to how it was. So, a number of things happened, and the more I'm playing this particular game, the more I realize that because of the complexity of the historical, political, military situations, so much of the game is on the cards. There's a significant amount of events that drive the historical things in the game where you might not otherwise, or it might be easy to kind of leave things aside or forget them. And so there was seeing a lot of that this turn. So the U-boats went away, which was nice. As such, we were able to land troops into Athens. And we were also able to land troops onto Gallipoli, although not a lot of progress was made. We kind of got them on the beachhead, and then we moved them on. And then the Turks made this cordon around here. They tried to do they did a flank attack, but this is a really strong Commonwealth force. And even with the flank attack and inflicting their hits first, that was a really tough ask from them. And so they had to do it because of the mandated offensive. That was because these are even worse attacks going across these rivers. And here it was all a bit too late to do anything meaningful. So we tried to do something here. It was kind of an exchange, which wasn't great for the Turks. So we got a bit of a cordon going on here, and we'll see how that plays out over the long term. Yeah, but again, landed some troops at Athens, but didn't really make any progress beyond that. Here, the Tigris Corps from India, these guys had attacked this way, defeated these guys, taken back this stuff, and then moved up this way. They took Kut, and they're a couple spaces away from Baghdad, and there's not a lot of reinforcements on the way. So this is, I don't really know. This is going to be a tough one, because there's a lot of VPs. Baghdad is 2 VPs, and it's a jihad city. which if we take that back, is going to reduce the jihad level, which is going to make some of these Arab tribes go off the board as they kind of go home. So the jihad's kind of reduced in its kind of strength, and if that makes sense. And we also had the Arab Revolt, which we put these out last term. We did an attack here, and we took over Mecca, which again is a jihad city. So we got a victory point from it, from taking it over, and we also reduced the jihad level. Now they're going to move out to Medina. That's also a victory point, also going to reduce the jihad level, and then we're going to go up to Man. So there's a lot of prime victory points here and here that's could be very, very dangerous for the Central Powers player. So we're playing with fire, and I don't know how long this game's going to be before it's over. And I say that because this has been a real struggle. The Ottomans were not able to make any meaningful progress over here this turn, and I think we had a couple reinforcements coming off the board into Tiflis, but really not a lot of movement. We did spring the Persian uprising over here, which has taken up a couple victory points here. I actually probably need to mark that. But I'm pretty sure that the Persian uprisings there block a couple of victory points, so we might be closer up to here for a 5. So it sprung this little kind of Persian uprising unit, which it's a unit, no, it's not the end of the world, but these uprising markers kind of went into those spaces as well. But the big thing that you might have noticed over here is all the stuff in the Balkans. So we had Romania activated, which put out all these green troops and a few Germans and Austro-Hungarians, a couple Russians as well. But later on, the CP bot also, they pulled Bulgaria activation, which activates Serbia as well. So we all of a sudden have these 3 Balkan powers and the Austro-Hungarians and the Germans, and that happened kind of midway through or towards the later end of the turn, so we didn't actually have any action here, but this is primed to be a much more traditional World War I slog, and I say that because we have lots and lots of big units on both sides, and a significant amount of forts and mountains, all of which provide these defensive bonuses, which is just really, really, really ugly. But yeah, the Romanians couldn't get in here before the Germans moved out. But there's like victory point, victory point, victory point, victory point, victory point. All these victory points here up for grabs. Sofia, if you can get there, is. But the Greeks, because the British player invaded Greece, took Athens, the Greeks activated on the CP side, so they swung a couple guys down here, but took losses. The Greeks are not really going to be a force to be reckoned with. So we're playing a little bit defensively with these guys who might move into Dogran. I don't know how to pronounce that. Just to kind of block the Serbs, but this could be nasty if we drop the French in here as well. But I didn't want to mix too many nationalities in a single area, also because it's attacking. But when you have multinational forces, it's much more expensive to activate areas. So I want to kind of move these guys out and then drop the French in there, but didn't quite get to that yet. But this is a big chunk of what the CP player. That's a huge threat. This is what's going to prolong the war, I think, because there's a lot of VPs to pick up here for the Allied player, and this is going to be tough to defend without draining these forces. But now we have the Bulgarians and the Germans to take care of the Romanians and the Serbians. We might be able to swing a couple of these guys down and try to counter some of this stuff that's going on. But that's also an extremely long way away. We're going to have to strategically redeploy some guys and kind of go from there. But the more this game goes on, I felt like this ramped up significantly in its intensity. And you can see, Central Powers, they're going to be at Total War, so they're going to get their really big Total War cards out. The Allied player's not quite there yet, but once they do, they'll get their Total War cards in. So that's a very interesting dynamic as well, but it is all kind of all over the place. There's action going on, but it was also lots of like priming and stuff. So I think next turn we're going to try to knock out these guys and really make this push and bring everyone up here, try to take Baghdad. That's going to really kind of threaten a lot of this stuff in the mid-board. So we're going to have to drain forces potentially out of Damascus, maybe even from over here, but there's not a lot of forces on the board. We might have to break down some of these guys and move them down. Real tough stuff going on, because I'm going to tell you, it's really hard to activate just these little tribes to go and like do offensives with them. To me, they're more of like blocking forces and things like that have to be dealt with, because spending a whole op on those guys that aren't particularly strong and also have a very limited movement range, that's a tough ask, honestly. These guys attacking across the Suez is almost suicide. It's so difficult. I tried it that one turn because I kind of had to on an event. But I got a couple French guys who popped on there. They're in Khartoum, but I was hoping to bring them on. But again, we get into that. Then it would be I've got India, Anzacs, and French in one spot. And then all of a sudden, that costs 3 ops to activate it to kind of separate them all out. It's hard to waste an op rearranging a lot of these guys, but I might have to spend a whole card kind of moving the stacks around so that in the future it'll be like a French stack, an Indian stack, and a British and Commonwealth stack. So that way, from then on, it's easier to activate them, but I'm still undecided. I don't know if I'm playing this game well. I am probably not. I'm probably making a lot of horrendous mistakes in it, but it is fascinating to play around with. It's really cool. From a geopolitics and military standpoint, I'm having a really good time with it, but we did complete our mandated offensives, even though they were kind of a waste and not great. I do love that little mechanic where it's like, even though it might not be to your benefit, you kind of have to do this crappy little attack over here, or trying to waste those somewhere. those suck. If you get bad rolls on those, you're like, ugh, I really don't want to commit to that, but that's what High Command wanted. I just think that's fascinating to kind of deal with, but that's kind of a look at turn 5. We'll see at turn 6. Turn 6, we've got winter of 1916. So we're going to have bad weather in all the mountains, which, spoiler alert, is the whole frickin' board. But I think that's going to help protect Romania and Serbia, at least for a bit. So we might actually have, it might be more static over here. So we've got time to build trenches. Because attacking in severe weather is so risky. We talked about that earlier. But then we'll get a little Russian army out as well. Those went on the board because of an event. I don't remember specifically which one, but I think that was the Romania event, I believe. So more troops are going to flood in over there. But that's where things stand. I'll see you at the end of turn 6. So here's a look at the end of turn 6. Just moved on to turn 7, but we just had turn 6, and a very eventful turn once again. Some very interesting things happened. You might notice, we'll kind of take a look at the Balkans over here, that the Serbs, or the Serbians, are no longer on the board. And that's because the Germans showed up. So there's a couple really important kind of backdrops to this. The Allied player rolled the no British can be involved in attacks without sacrificing victory points mandated offensive. So all the BR British units are basically fixed and couldn't do anything, because I'm not about to give up victory points for that. We're just going to suck it up and, you know, it's 1916, it's winter, but it's time to divert everything over to the to the west front, basically. No resources for us, sadly. So what that meant is that guys in Athens didn't move, half the guys in Gallipoli didn't move, no real movement down here or anything like that, and so those guys was kind of stuck. But we also had Enver was on the British Indian Anzac, and they also had to attack with some Turkish units as well. But so they had 2 mandatory offensives to do. One was against some units. You can see basically Mesopotamia is kind of collapsing at this point, because these attacks are all suicide. Can't really attack these idiots because that's also suicide and would be really bad and would open this up for free movement basically. So their only real option of doing kind of anything was there was a lot of piddling around going on down here, and so they did one minor attack that didn't go anywhere. But the Indian troops and the Anzac troops made significant progress up here, although it was a very close run thing. And effectively what happened was that there was lots of swirling going on, because this is quite wide open. I know it looks like it's 3 lanes, but we don't have many units. And the hand was really bad, did not have a lot of ops to work with, often just 2. We had stacks of units of different nationalities, so those were expensive to move. But basically, we knocked out some guys, reclaimed all of this, moved up, took Kut, and then this was up here, and then they were kind of out on their own, and so they swung one of the 3 units that were here down here, retook Kut, and cut this off from supply. And so we were forced to kind of move these guys up, which saved this, and it put these guys out of supply, who then weren't able to move or attack to kind of get to free themselves. They needed to get free, and this was way, way, way too strong to get through to do anything meaningful. So that unit died in the attrition phase, and we kind of took all of this, and all of this went to our control as part of that. So that was really a good thing, although it was very nervous going into that last card, and I tried desperately to puzzle it out to see if I could get the Ottomans to be able to get these guys out of supply and to get themselves back into supply here, which couldn't get it done. So that was really tense, doing that. We also have down here our Arab revolt units, so we got Faisal, Lawrence of Arabia. We had a couple guys that they took Mecca last turn. They're now going over here, and they laid siege to Medina, and in the siege phase at the end of the turn, I rolled a 6, which was amazing. It's what you need. And so the besieged marker flipped to destroyed, picked up a victory point, removed the jihad city. So that was very good that we didn't get bogged down here. And this is a 3-level fort, so it's a 50-50. A lot of these are like 1s where they're kind of nothingy, but the 3 is a close run thing. I wasn't really sure what I was doing with Faisal. He's only got 2 movement only, but he's got these spaces that only he can go in. And so he actually moved up here, and then we moved him back this way to cut these guys off from supply, who they have limited supply here. So I think they might flip. I actually hadn't done that. I need to pay attention to that. But I did that also to put pressure on Jerusalem, where this unit had moved down here to kind of block this, but moving him out here threatens Jerusalem, and this is way too valuable to give up. So they had to kind of move back there. Can't really vacate Damascus, and most of these guys are not good, and we're just not getting the replacement points in. The CP player had really bad cards for replacement points this turn. Like, it was all just like 1. Or there was like 1 good one, but the event was too good to pass up. That's a really tough dynamic that's gone on in this game so far, especially for the Ottomans, is they're just not getting replacement points in a consistent way. And where I'd been being stingy earlier, now they need them. The cards aren't coming up. So I think I'm going to have to be a bit more judicious about that, and just kind of throw them a bunch of replacement points and kind of sack the next turn, which would suck, but they kind of have to do that. I did have the AP player had the Kitchener Invades event, which is really strong, because we'd flipped Cyprus to us, so we can use that as a landing point to invade Syria, which isn't great. It gives up a victory point, but it unlocks all this stuff, which maybe we might not need with these guys messing around, but it basically allows us to land troops here, flank all of this, and kind of cut all this out, and start going on our own here, because everyone's going to have to pull back, because there's not a lot of supply down here. They have to be able to trace supply back to Damascus, and if we can cut that off with landings, different story, but can't do invasions in the winter, and it was a winter turn, so I had this glorious opportunity that I'd set up, couldn't do it. And the Kitchener invades is so strong because the Kitchener's invasion, because it places the beachhead immediately, and you immediately put the guys on here, instead of you put them into the reserve box and have to wait a whole nother turn to do it. It's a really, really, really strong, but couldn't get it to go, which sucked. The other funny thing that happened was I set up that blockade like on turn 2 of the game or whatever, and it's finally a winter turn where they would lose a VP for having the blockade. But if the CP are in total war, they do not lose that, and they were at total war last turn. So like finally they might lose a VP. Can't do it. But all things considered, I think the CP's in some trouble. This was really strong. Picking up these was really, really good. It got us a lot of VPs back, but then we've kind of lost a bunch here, and we're losing them here. This is really bad. This is looking not great for the CP player. Once the Germans very easily walked into Belgrade and Skopje, I thought, I was like, oh no, this is going to be real bad for the ally player. But then everything else on the board kind of balanced that out, which is such an interesting experience. The Russians launched an attack here. No, the Turks launched an attack at them. I think it was. They eliminated all of this, so I lost my other Russian HQ. Lost both of those permanently from the game, which probably not great. But because this was reduced, they couldn't advance after combat. And so there's this sweet, sweet victory point, but they couldn't move in there and take it. And also you just run the risk of, if you move out here and these guys kind of send a guy down here, you're now tracing supply. You can't. So you have to then take these spaces and then you could trace this way, but that's the joy of this game, is that you can't do really silly things or really gamey things unless you can back it up. So you do some kind of stuff early and then you got to back it up, because if you get guys out of supplies, it's done with. And I like that rule because it prevents you from doing things which are gamey rather than historically appropriate. Some people may think it's a bit handcuffs, but I actually appreciate what it does for the game state. Russians basically did nothing this whole turn, and maybe they need to get their head in the game now that we've got some pockets of open space opening up, so I'll probably swing these guys down next time. Not really sure what to do about any of this. This is really, really gross. But, I don't know. Hopefully we can get some strong AP stuff going on. Hopefully we don't have the British troops locked up again, so that they can go and do some attacks and threaten this to divert troops down and away, make some headway. Oh, that was some other things. We drained some troops from up here down into Gallipoli because the Anzacs could do attacks, and they did. So we're going to get some significant fighting going on here. I'm very curious to see how that goes. But so a lot going on in this. I'm enjoying the hell out of it, but I will see you at the end of turn 7, because we just finished turn 6. So here's a look at the map. We just finished turn 7, and afraid to say that the game is has finished, is my understanding of it. The victory points went down to -1. A lot of stuff happened in this turn. Well, a good amount of stuff happened, but the CP player just could not get any good cards. And so that was an interesting kind of quirk. I think they had a total of like 2 cards that they could play that were like good, strong cards. And a lot of the rest of them were these little 2-op combat cards, which are like, that was really crippling for them. Not being able to do a whole bunch, but also tactically things were looking very ugly, specifically down here. So you can see the Commonwealth forces here, a lot of Indian and Anzac troops, marched on Baghdad. That's a 2 victory point city, and it's a jihad city. You can see the jihad level, which was kind of up at like 7 or 8, went all the way down to 4 this turn. That was a big part of that. We also had an Armenian uprising, which is great for the AP player. They were able to put up this Armenian unit here to take a little victory space and put out these Armenian uprising counters, which kind of like make it you can't trace, or it's limited supply tracing through those, and you have to go and clear those off if you end up going fighting near them. And if that ended up being wrong and we could have done it this way, maybe that's what we should have done, because it's easier to do that. We also marched through here, besieged this fort down here. We succeeded at that roll at the end, which was nice. That's why it was -1 and not just 0. Not really any movement on Gallipoli. I think we maybe did one little attack. But the victory points got so slim that the Ottomans were kind of in a preventative defensive phase. So we went and sat back. We swung guys down from Constantinople to try and reinforce Gallipoli, but ended up not really needing to. They just could not get a breakthrough, the CP player. We tried to do this Hail Mary to go and launch an attack on Athens, but were unable to make any progress there. It was really close, though, because the Allied player rolled really badly. The CP player also rolled kind of badly as well. They were on the 4 table of the large combat, of the heavy fire table. They were on the 4, and they rolled, I think, a 2. So they only did 2 step losses. And the Allies were on the 7 table of the light fire table. They also rolled a 2. So if the CP player had rolled anything higher than they did, they would have inflicted more losses, and as such would be the winner of the combat. And because we only inflicted 2, it doesn't affect the loss number here, and this full strength unit would have been able to advance after combat, would have forced to retreat back to the beachhead and back to Lemnos, which would have been bad, and they would have picked up this victory point here, which could have kept the game going on, but they rolled catastrophically in game terms, and even though the AP player rolled badly, they rolled enough to kind of tie it, so there's no winner, so they didn't have to retreat. Other than that, the Turks tried to lay siege to Kars, but rolled a 1 on their siege roll, because they're so cool like that. They kind of moved out, took a victory point here to kind of gain 1 back, but the Armenian uprising, which took 1 off of them, also has a -1 victory point on the card as well, because it's a real bad look for the Ottomans. So that was a very interesting little card, that it was hold on to that, because I had seen it maybe 2 or 3 turns ago, and not been able to use it effectively because I needed the ops for it, I think. But now I was in a great position to use the event, and it really was a big turning point, because if the game had been able to go on, they have to pull guys off the line. These little tribes can't go far enough, so they got to pull guys off the line to do that. But losing Baghdad, all of these guys were like, oh no, got to come back and protect all this, because we tried to do some counterattacks, but there's just not enough units. The battle for Baghdad was fascinating. We had SR'd a big LCU down here, and so they had an LCU and a little SCU, a little infantry division, but the rolls were extremely skewed. The Commonwealth stack had 3, 4, 5 points plus 1 for having Cav, and they rolled a 6, so they got 3 losses, and the LCU that was there was, I don't remember specifically which one it was. Oh, you know what? It was this one, and it was on this side. So they took 3 losses, and the problem is that we take 2 losses here, and there were no units in the reserve box. There were no infantry divisions that could survive, because you can't replace regular boring old infantry with these infantry, the elite ones, you can if this was blue, you could go down to white, but you can't go from white to blue. You can't have a regular boring core spawn like an elite infantry division, basically. And so this was perma eliminated, so that would have been very bad in the long term as well. There was nothing to replace it with, so all of a sudden they just had one piddly little half step that had to retreat, because I think this was full and went down one as well. So, and they did like basically nothing in return. I think they did one, but we've subsequently fixed those, or I can't remember. But it was catastrophic, that the Battle of Baghdad. That was really interesting to see. Hey, if you roll really well against really bad, it will swing wildly. So that was interesting. But yeah, this final turn was a very tough one. CP player had bad hand and bad rolls, and you can't survive that in a game that was kind of going to the wire there. But a fascinating experience, that's for sure. I will set up kind of a full review of this, but thanks for sticking with me on my little journey through this game and learning. The reality is each turn's about an hour. For me, sitting in the rules, kind of doing it on my own. It would get quicker, but I'm also not in any particular rush because I was doing this solo, so that's just to give you a little gauge of what that's like. It would get quicker the more you knew it, and I feel like now I have a lot of the Chrome down in my brain, so I can kind of go through the turns a bit quicker, but I'm not pressed for time, so I don't have to do that. But once again, thanks for tuning in. I've been Alexander from theplayersaid.com.